Writing the Small Business Regulation Reform Act resulted in not only an award from the Small Business Administration in Washington, but it resulted in people feeling confident to invest in businesses in the state. Taking on the Capco monopoly was not easy, but it was the right thing to do. You see, capital investment was tied up into two firms in the state, and Capco had been driven out of two states, resulting in the convictions of a couple of governors in Louisiana. It took someone that wasn't afraid to do the right thing. That's my background. That's what I do. The plan that I've crafted for the U.S. House is very similar. We need to make sure that regulations are not interfering with small business entrepreneurs, and we're not governing from the top down. We all know that businesses flourish from the ground up. We're Americans. The ideas that we have are second to none. We need to make sure that the tax climate and the regulation climate are not getting in the way, which is why I not only support auditing the Federal Reserve, I support taking a look at the tax structure and looking at a flat tax. The loopholes in the tax structure and the growth of the IRS and the 1,100 agencies, now I'm getting to the budget part, how would you balance the budget? The growth in the 1,100 agencies that need to be audited and held accountable for the lack of services will result in deep cuts. Two examples, and I'm going to leave the IRS alone. What does that say? I'm sorry.
2-minute warning.
Okay. Thank you. Well, you've got to have humor so we can open up our minds. In auditing and really ensuring that the 1,100 agencies on the federal level are serving us, we're going to make sure that your tax dollars are not being wasted. Agencies such as the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy was created in the 70s with one goal: to ensure that we were energy independent. Well, it's 2010. We missed our mark. Here's my plan for being in office. Energy costs, tax and regulation environments and requirements, and healthcare costs are the determinant of whether or not businesses set up business in this country. We need to address each. Instead of healthcare that takes over your decision making and raises costs because it's top-down management, we need to focus on what will reduce costs and what makes sense for small business. Instead of being energy dependent on other countries with only one source of energy, we need to make sure that we have a diverse portfolio of alternative energies to make sure that our agricultural businesses, small businesses, and manufacturers stay in this country. The jobs we produce hinge on whether or not you elect someone with experience and a track record of getting things done. I have that. I know how to be tough when times need someone to be tough, but you don't need to raise your voice. All you need to do is be able to build strong coalitions that believe in your goals, and your goals have to be one. How do I best serve the people that elect me? That's why I was proud to have served the people in the 56th Assembly District for 6 years, and I was proud to go home and run my own business. I believe in term limits. You deserve them, and you deserve honest representation in Washington. Thank you.
Reed, are you ready to roll? Sure. Reed Ribble.
It's good to be home in Kaukauna. Thanks for everybody for coming out today. I spent the last 30 years operating and owning my own roofing company, which is in the newer, I guess it's the middle industrial park in Kaukauna. We were the first business that was ever, my company is located right behind Truck Country. And the issue of jobs is an important one. I think it's the single biggest issue that our country faces right now because it's connected to the second question as it relates to deficit spending and the national debt as well. I was challenged a few days ago by a Democrat friend of mine about how we must raise taxes if we're going to ever balance a budget, and I challenged back saying, no, we must raise taxpayers. And there's a significant difference between those two philosophies. If we can raise up taxpayers, we can bring in more revenue, obviously, to the Treasury. But The question at hand is, really what can government do to help bring jobs back to Wisconsin, or just get jobs to Wisconsin? And there's good and bad news in this answer. The good news is that the government can't do much, nor should it. But the government can do a whole lot to get in the way of real job creation. Again, the same person that was challenging me just the other day when I said we need to have less regulation, and he regulated everything, and this is what got us in this mess, and began to pontificate about the whole thing. Well, from 2000 to 2008, when President Bush was in charge of things, the federal government promulgated on average over 70,000 pages of new regulations per year on American business owners. I hardly call that deregulation. When you add almost 20,000 pages from the state of Wisconsin, that's nearly 1 million pages promulgated on business owners over the last decade. Every single new regulation has an impact to business because there's a cost to that. And it becomes accumulative. It builds up on itself until, of course, you get to this tipping point or the stopping point where the economy screeches to a halt, which is exactly what we have right now. And so in reality, you have to take a look at what are the things that obstruct business owners from hiring. And we talk about uncertainty. We don't really know what the cost of the new health care bill is going to be in hiring employees. We talk about what's the potential cost of cap and trade. And all those things weigh heavily on business owners as they try to decide whether they should add people or whether they should just expand through use of overtime the current workforce that they have as their companies grow. But the one thing that hardly ever gets talked about in this equation is consumer confidence. We have a crisis of confidence in this country as far as what's going on with the American consumer, and no one talks about it. Businesses will create jobs when consumers buy goods and services, and we have to create an environment in this country where the consumer is got confidence and faith and trust in government policy, so that they will again feel safe and comfortable in buying. But there's not a lot of confidence there. And a couple of things that can be done to help build confidence is to begin to get government out of the way, begin to reduce the pressure points that are causing American consumers to worry about what's going on. Right now we're looking at what could be the largest tax increase being put back in place at the end of 2010, and that will have a dramatic negative effect on that consumer. Do you realize that if the Bush tax cuts that were done in 2003 are just allowed to expire, that they just sunset them, that our lowest income earners in the United States will have a 50% increase in their taxes? Now, we were often told about how that was just a tax cut for the rich, but the lowest income earners in this country will have their taxes go up from 10% to 15%. That's a 50% increase in their tax burden. It's the most regressive tax increase in the history of the country. The highest income earners will have their taxes go up about 10%. Now, just stop and think, you got to reverse that, because you've been told by the current administration that this was nothing but a tax giveaway to the rich. Well, it wasn't. It was a tax benefit to the poor, and that ought to stay in place. And those types of things will help build confidence. Allowing consumers to have more money in their pockets and understanding what government's next moves will be are critical. And if you can begin to raise up customers, you will raise up business. This is not rocket science, but it does require confidence in our government, which we just simply don't have right now. And I've heard it over and over again. The federal deficit is one of those reasons we don't have a lot of confidence, quite frankly. I'm glad this question was asked. Well, countries get in trouble the same way businesses and individuals get in trouble. They get in trouble over time. They build up and they overspend over time. And our government has overspent over time over the last 50 years, pretty consistently growing itself. And how do you get the deficit and get it under control is that you begin to contract over time, just like you do in your own budgets. You go and you buy something and then you spend the time paying for it. Well, the government just seems to keep buying and buying and buying and never paying and paying. And quite frankly, you have to begin getting out of debt and begin paying down the deficit, begin getting our national debt paid off incrementally, the same way that you got in trouble. I don't believe it needs to be draconian, but it needs to be consistent. There has to be a reduction, a structural reduction in the size of government. And if you can reduce the government by 5% a year for 4 years, and you add to that the significant part of the message that will come back to the community is that you can begin to grow and the economy will begin to grow, you can get back to a structural balance. And you can do it by about 2015 depending on the rate of growth in the economy. But stop and think of the powerful message to consumers, to confidence, if they actually saw government live within its means. If they actually saw government say, well, we can't continue to grow. And if they did that, consumer confidence would happen, jobs would be created, and the economy could once again be robust. And that's how you get to these places. So thank you very much.
Roger, I know you've got another commitment later this morning, so you'll be around for about 8 o'clock or so, you said. I'll give you Roger Roth.
Good morning. How are you all doing today?
Good.
You know, we go to a lot of forums, and I know those who are up here can attest to this. A lot of these breakfast forums, lunch forums, have been doing this over the course of the last year, and everyone always promises that there's going to be 100 people there, and you show up, and sometimes you only have 10 or 15. But Kaukauna always delivers. It's good to see you folks here today. I am Representative Roger Roth, serving the state legislature from a district in Appleton, North Appleton, out towards Winneconne since 2006. I'm a third-generation home builder. My family and I own and operate several construction-related businesses in the Fox Valley, and for the last 6.5 years, been a member of the Wisconsin Air National Guard, deployed to Iraq 3 times in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I'm running for Congress. And we've got a couple of questions here, which I think when we talk about will kind of highlight why exactly I am running for Congress. Success and job creation, the first question. What we have right now is uncertainty. The economy needs confidence. When I go around and talk to business owners all over northeast Wisconsin, they tell me, just let me know where I'm at. We have tax cuts that are set to expire, set to increase at the end of this year. We've got environmental regulatory policy that is coming. I talked to paper industry here in northeast Wisconsin. There's a thing coming out from the EPA called the IV Boiler Act, which is going to cost our paper industry here in northeast Wisconsin, the entire state of Wisconsin, $600 million. There's uncertainty. They don't even know where that ruling's at right now. And if we can ever expect to get job creation going, we've got to give businesses that kind of certainty. Well, how do you do that? Well, first, we do the one thing that every economist in the world says should be done, and that's we don't raise taxes in the midst of a recession. And secondly, we've got to help out our small businesses get access to that credit. This economy moves on credit. And right now, when I talk to developers and business owners, they say we're having an awful hard time getting access to credit. We go into banks and other lending institutions, and it's not that they're not willing, but the federal bank regulators are breathing down their necks saying, don't you make those loans. So for businesses that have never missed a payment, for businesses that have perfect credit rating, we've got to have more flexible guidelines with our federal regulators to make sure that they can continue to receive that access to credit. I talked to a convenience store owner here in the Fox Valley who told me he's got 2 convenience stores, wants to build and expand to that 3rd, but he can't do it not knowing what's going to come from the federal government. And over the last 2 years, we've had a history of that uncertainty. Cap and trade, detrimental of manufacturing, detrimental of agriculture, brings about uncertainty. Not knowing what's going to happen with these tax cuts at the end of the year brings about uncertainty. This federal health care bill that they've passed brings about massive amounts of uncertainty. Government doesn't create jobs, government only creates debt. But what government can do is to create that atmosphere by which small businesses in the private sector are able to grow and flourish. Now, when we turn to government spending, it's at an unsustainable trajectory right now. How many of you know who Ben Stein is?